Today is Tuesday, February 18th, 2025, and welcome into the first ever episode of the Rounding Third podcast. I'm your host, Jaden Harper. This podcast is really going to focus on everything Major League Baseball. So, I usually do the Phillies fan podcast, which comes out every week, multiple times a week. This podcast is going to be specified right on Major League Baseball and all the teams from the AL East to the NL West. Every team will be covered on this podcast. It's going to be multiple times a week. But today we're really going to focus on the AL East and their season preview. This is a very compelling division. But before I get started, make sure to like and subscribe and turn on post notifications so you never miss when I upload another podcast episode. And I will also be live this Sunday when the Phillies take on the Baltimore Orioles. That is at 1:05 Eastern Time. Spring training action right here on Big Fan Sports, so make sure to check that out. So this division really compels me. It's something that I have thought of for the last couple of weeks. This is a very competitive division, right? You've had the Yankees win the AL East in 2023. Then you saw the Orioles win it in 2023. The Yankees won it last year in 2024. The Yankees won it again in 2022. Rays won it in 21 and 20. The Yankees won it in 19. Red Sox in 18, so on and so forth. This division has been where you've seen a lot of playoff teams from the American League come out of the AL East. Last year there were 2 playoff teams from the AL East. The year before, there were 3 playoff teams from the AL East. So this division produces playoff teams. And I feel like each team has its own different storyline going into this year that is going to be interesting to watch throughout the year. We'll start with, I think, which is the most interesting one, the Toronto Blue Jays. Last year had a really bad year. They underperformed. They missed the playoffs for the first time in 2 years. First time after making it back-to-back years. And in 2021, they won 91 games. This is a team that made additions in the offseason that will make them better. They added Anthony Santander. They also added Jeff Hoffman from the Phillies. And they added Max Scherzer, the legend, starting pitcher one day. First ballot Cooperstown Hall of Fame pitcher who's won 2 World Series before. So they've added good talent, but this division is so stacked, and the level of their talent, I don't know if it's good enough to even make the playoffs in the American League. The American League's a stacked league right now. I don't think their talent is really good enough to go to the playoffs in the American League this year, because they made their additions this offseason. Those 3 I mentioned. They also added Andres Gimenez. Their hitting is just okay, right? George Springer has taken a step back. Dalton Varsho, his primary thing isn't hitting. It's more his defense. Gimenez is a great defender, not as good as a hitter. He showed a flash of the pan back in 22. Hasn't really been able to hit that since. You look at Ernie Clement, he's an okay hitter. He's not a great hitter, right? He's not going to be, one of the best third basemen. He's a serviceable guy. He's someone you'd want at third base. I'm not saying he's a bad third baseman, right? But he's not, a great hitter. As, at the plate, you have Alejandro Kirk, he's taken a step back at the plate as well. Bo Bichette has really taken a step back at a plate from where he was when the Blue Jays made their playoff runs. So you really look at a couple guys you got to depend on for hitting. That's Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and now Anthony Santander. They bring in Santander. He hit 40 home runs last year at Baltimore. One of the main reasons why they got back to the playoffs, right? He has been a monster at the plate, switch hitting, play outfield, play some DH. He's played some first way in the past, but he is a guy who could bring some versatility to the Toronto Blue Jays. And they kind of need it, right? They have a team of young guys who are going to be hitting free agency sooner than later. That's where it gets really interesting. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., he's a free agent at the end of the 2025 season. He's been one of the best players in the MLB for the last 4 or 5 years since he's come up. He was really close to winning AL MVP back in 2021, lost out to Shohei Ohtani, and he had a really good year last year. He's been a guy who started his career at third, transitioned over to first, and has been a 30 home run a year guy. He's going to hit usually 80 or 90 plus RBIs, 250 or higher average. Usually it's around 280, 290 with Vladdy. He's one of the best players in the game, not alone one of the best first basemen in all of Major League Baseball. And the Blue Jays and him were looking to make an extension happen this offseason. Vladdy kind of set his own deadline of when we report to camp, that's when I want a deal done. That hasn't happened yet. Today, the Blue Jays were starting to get ready. He's done his own countdown on his Instagram stories. And with the Toronto Blue Jays, if they don't get this extension done, I would say right now I'm filming it. This is a night before this comes out. I would say they have until tomorrow morning. So right around when this comes out to get this extension done. Because if they do not, the chances are slim to none that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. would return to the Toronto Blue Jays this upcoming offseason. He's going to be on the open market. And you've seen what Juan Soto and Shohei Ohtani have gotten on the open market the last 2 years. And I'm not saying he's Shohei Ohtani or Juan Soto, but Vladimir Guerrero is a very, very good player. And he's a guy who could easily get 400, 450, maybe even 500 if he tests $1 million on the open market. There's a lot of teams that need a first baseman or would just want a guy like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Most people wouldn't shy away from offering Vladimir Guerrero Jr. a contract, even if there's not a need immediately at first base. He's going to be a guy that a lot of teams are going to come after. The Yankees were probably going to come after him. I could potentially see the Mets come after him. The Red Sox will definitely come after Vladimir Guerrero Jr. So that's 3 teams right there who could outbid the Toronto Blue Jays and will most likely have more success than the Toronto Blue Jays in the 2025 season. So if Vladdy and the Jays don't get this extension done by, I would say, when this podcast comes out, this is his last year in Toronto. That's a big mistake by the Blue Jays because they're not going to get him back. They have been swinging and missing on free agents for the last couple of years, right? They were in on Judge. They weren't able to get him. They were in on Ohtani. People thought he was on a plane heading to Toronto. They didn't get him. They were in on Sasaki. They were a finalist. Didn't get him. In on Alonso. Didn't get him. They got Scherzer, but they haven't been able to get the big names. They're like the AL San Francisco Giants. They haven't been able to get the big names in free agency. They haven't been able to finally get the big splash. They've lost out on a lot of free agents. If you're Vladdy, there's no really incentive if you don't get an extension done to stay in Toronto, which could make a very interesting deadline above the border, right? You see the Blue Jays, they could be sellers at this deadline. They have pieces to move, right? They have the starting pitcher they can move. They have Bo Bichette, who's a free agent at the end of the 2025 season. If he has a decent, solid year, there are teams, the Atlanta Braves, for example, the National League East, who would love to have a shortstop, a decent shortstop like a Bo Bichette. And a lot of teams are going to be after Vladimir Guerrero Jr. on the open, like on the trade market. Teams that have a chance to trade and potentially get one of the best stars of this generation onto their team. So the Blue Jays are going to have to evaluate early what they want to do at the trade deadline. Because what they do at this deadline could impact the franchise for years and years to come. Because if they don't get this extension with Vladdy done, I would be honestly surprised if Ross Atkins, the Blue Jays general manager, plays his cards well. It would make sense for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to get traded at the deadline. Honestly, no matter where the Blue Jays are, because realistically, they're not going to be better probably than the 4 teams ahead of them in the AL East. I project them finishing last in the division. I don't think they have a chance to make the playoffs. They have to trade Vladimir Guerrero Jr. You saw the mistake the Angels made with Shohei Ohtani. They let him walk for nothing. They didn't get anything back for him, and he went on to sign with the Dodgers for $700 million, right? They wasted the opportunity. They were out of contention already to potentially get one of the biggest hauls in MLB history for a player of Shohei Ohtani's caliber. There are going to be teams that are going to be after a first baseman at the trade deadline. You look at where they are right now, realistically, there aren't going to be many first basemen available at the deadline. So a guy like Vladdy, you look at a team like the Chicago Cubs, they kind of, like, I would say they need a first baseman still, right? Michael Busch is a very good player. But when you have a chance to trade for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., you're probably going to trade for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. if you have the assets. You look at the Boston Red Sox, Tristan Casas is a great player. His name has been floated around a lot this offseason in trade rumors. Do the Blue Jays potentially trade him to an in-division rival at the deadline? You know, there's so many teams that you can look and point at and say, oh, they need a first baseman. They need a first baseman. The Seattle Mariners, they're a team that's going to be most likely in the race to make the playoffs. They would need a first baseman. Cleveland, I would say, would need a first baseman. You look at teams in the AL, in the NL. Pittsburgh, if they're competing, they need a first baseman. The list goes on and on and on. San Francisco potentially needs a first baseman if they are contending this year. It doesn't hurt for the Padres to potentially get a first baseman if they're going to contend this year. So there are going to be teams in the market to get Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at the deadline. The question is, do the Blue Jays do the move? And I think they have to. Right now, I would say the Blue Jays probably finish around a record of 73, 75 wins. Maybe they'll go as low as 70. I don't think they have a shot at making the playoffs. I would say their ceiling for wins is about an 80 win season. I really don't think they have the roster to compete in their division because their division is so stacked that I could see the other four teams having a path to make the postseason in 2025. But right now, I would say the Blue Jays are going to finish last in the AL East. It's hard to rank the other four teams in this division. We'll look at the Rays. They have a really, really good rotation. I would say they have one of the better rotations in the American League, right? You look at Shane McClanahan returning from Tommy John surgery, Shane Baz returning from injury. You have Taj Bradley, who had a very good season in 2024. Ryan Pepe, they got him from the Dodgers in the Tyler Glasnow trade. He had a very good season in 2024. Drew Rasmussen is coming back from injury. So the Rays are kind of coming back to form. 2024 was a really off year for Tampa Bay with all the injuries they dealt with, all the players they ended up trading away, right? They traded away the remaining core of that 2020 pennant team, and now they have this basically brand new team that can compete in 2025. The rotation is very good. The bullpen has, good players. I wouldn't say they're great pitchers, but knowing the Rays, they know how to make bullpen arms great. And their lineup is not half bad. They had Danny Jansen this offseason. Catcher position gets an improvement. Yandy Diaz is one of the better first basemen in baseball. Brandon Lau had a great season last year. I would say he's a top 10 second baseman in baseball. Junior Caminero had a great second half of his rookie season coming up onto the scene. With the Rays, he could be a really blooming piece for Tampa Bay in 2025. He is going to get a full season over there at third. I think he will increase his value and his skill at the position. You look at the biggest addition they made is Ha-Seong Kim. They finally got the shortstop. He's going to be late to start the season. He probably won't start the year till late April, early May, recovering from surgery. He's one of the better second shortstops in baseball. He's very underrated. He can move around the infield. A couple years ago, back in 2023, I think he was top 25 in NL MVP voting. That's how good of a season he had. Ha-Seong Kim, the Rays finally got their quote-unquote splash. Most people would call it a huge splash, but the Rays really made a move. They made some moves this offseason to make the team better. The outfield, I would say, is a little shaky. They have to make improvements there if they want to contend in 2025. But for the most part, the Rays are not a bad team. I look at a team like the Baltimore Orioles. They're division rivals. The Orioles made the playoffs the last two postseasons. They have continued to take a step back. I know it has to be frustrating for Oriole fans out there, considering this year they came into the offseason having Corbin Burnes and Anthony Santander both on their roster. They did not re-sign either of them. Burnes ended up going to Arizona, and Santander went to Toronto. They really didn't make any big splashes this offseason. Their team got worse. One of their biggest moves is signing a 41-year-old starting pitcher in Charlie Morton, which isn't going to move a scale. They had about 7 free agents. They didn't sign a single one of them back. This is a concerning side for Baltimore. Yes, I understand they have to get extensions done, but then get the extensions done for Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson, who aren't extended yet. So there's going to be a point in time where they're going to get close to their contract years, their first free agent opportunities, and they're going to hit the open market potentially if the Orioles don't get an extension done sooner than later when their value is not at its highest. They really have one of the worst starting rotations, I wouldn't say in baseball, but it's close. It is a bad rotation. Grayson Rodriguez is the ace. He's not a bad pitcher, but he's not a great pitcher. I don't think he's an ace yet. He dealt with injuries last year. He did not have his best year. I can't say he's an ace yet. You look at Zach Eflin. I love Zach Eflin. He's a former Philadelphia Philly, but he has regressed a little in his stats. He got traded from Tampa Bay at the deadline to Baltimore, and I really don't love him as a second pitcher on a team that's trying to win a championship. I just don't think that works. You look at their third best pitcher is Dean Kramer. Sometimes great pitcher. Sometimes he has his really, really bad starts. And you can't really rely on that to try to win, crucial division games and make the playoffs in a stacked American League. The Orioles lineup is one of the best still in baseball. They didn't really lose anybody besides Santander, and they got Tyler O'Neill. It's a great move. Their lineup is a very good lineup. The pitching is going to lose them 10 to 15 games this year. This team, if a solid pitching staff, could probably win 95 games easily. With the pitching staff they have, I don't know if they can make the playoffs. They might be an 85-win team this year. You look at the two teams, I would say potentially even three. Tampa Bay has a better rotation than them. And their lineup, it's worse. I don't know how much it really makes up. It's really close. I would say Tampa Bay is in that 82, 85 win range where I would put Baltimore right now because of the fact that their pitching lacks so much that it takes away from their ability to win games. Yes, they'll get Felix Bautista back, but besides that, the bullpen, they didn't really make any improvements to it. They traded for Seranthony Dominguez at last year's trade deadline from the Phillies, but that still doesn't really do anything for them to make the playoffs. Seranthony Dominguez is a good pitcher, but he's not, the best setup guy you could potentially have. I look at this rotation, and it really scares me to the point that it's going to lose Baltimore a lot of games. And it's going to be the reason why they end up missing the playoffs. In the AL, you can't give up games. The AL is too good this year to be giving up games. You have the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Mariners, the Rangers, the Astros, the Tigers, the Royals, the Guardians, and Twins that can all make the playoffs. Even the A's have a chance, I would say. They have a good team. They have a better rotation, I would say right now, than the Orioles. And that is not something you want to hear, that a team that really almost is hopeless right now has a better rotation than the Baltimore Orioles, who made the playoffs the last 2 years and have gotten worse. That's the biggest issue. And you could blame part of it on injury, right? Kyle Bradish, he's still working his way back. But besides that, the Baltimore Orioles haven't made constant improvements to their team to try to win baseball games and try to win divisions, try to win World Series, because they have a chance to do that. Baltimore is in a position where they could win the World Series. They won 100 games back in 2023. They were the best team in the American League. They can go out and compete for World Series championships. But right now, if you're not going to supply your team with enough pitching pieces, you're not going to win. This team reminds me a lot, I wouldn't say a lot, but it reminds me of the 2021 Phillies. The Phillies had a great lineup in 2021. It's not as good as it is now, but it was a serviceable lineup. Their pitching was so bad where they blew. I remember this the stat. They blew almost 50 saves back in 2021. They lost the division by 6 games. The Atlanta Braves, who won the division, went on to win the World Series. You see how little these games in June, July matter when you get to September where you're trying to make the playoffs. You can't really, you don't have the room to give up games. In Baltimore, not going out and making their team better is going to hurt them in the long run. Yeah, maybe they'll be better in 2026, but this is a win-now team. As much as you want to think that Gunnar Henderson and Adley Rutschman are going to be in Baltimore for a long time, their free agent years are going to come up sooner than later. The Orioles really did nothing this offseason to make their pitching better. They made their hitting a little better, but realistically, Tyler O'Neill won't live up to what he did last year. He was barely able to stay on the field. He had a good season when he was on the field, but he's had an injury-riddled career. So you go from a guy in Anthony Santander who is almost on the field, I would say, for 90-95% of the season, to a guy in Tyler O'Neill who isn't really on the field at all times and isn't as good as a hitter. Baltimore failed this offseason, and it's going to end up costing them when we get to September and they're trying to make a postseason push. They won't have the pieces to do it with. And I think they're maybe an 85, 84, 83 win team this year, and that has to be disappointing for Baltimore fans if that is the case. Now we go to the second best team in the division. This is what I've had to think about for a while. If you asked me this a week ago, it would be a different team. Right now, I have to say it's the New York Yankees. Right? Obviously, they went to the World Series last year. They were the best team in the American League. They're still one of the best teams in the American League. But I don't think they did enough to replace the Soto offense that they're losing. They're losing a guy who almost hit 40 home runs last year, who was an all-star last year, who was one of the best players in baseball last year, top 5 in MVP voting last year. They lost that. They got Cody Bellinger. Cody Bellinger's a good hitter, but he's not a Juan Soto. But you look at Cody Bellinger's a great player. It's what else they didn't add so far this offseason, which is going to cost them. Left field, Jason Dominguez, you're relying on a guy who's been a prospect for the last 5 years, hasn't really been able to prove, he's been ranked high as a prospect for years and years, came up in 2023, played well, had to get arm surgery, came back last year, was one of the worst hitters in Major League Baseball. You relying on him to play 162 out of left field. You look at third base, Oswaldo Cabrera is a great player. He is more of a utility guy and not an everyday third baseman. And if you don't start him, you're starting DJ LeMay, who is way out of his prime, and the Yankees are kind of stuck with his contract. Now you have this injury news about Giancarlo Stanton, who is projecting to be one of your top hitters. He might not be ready for opening day. He's dealing with what looks like tennis elbow. He hasn't swung a bat in 3 to 4 weeks. He might not be ready to play on opening day. He might miss 2-3 weeks into the season. You're gonna have to play LeMahieu and Cabrera every single day. That's not what the Yankees want to do. Anthony Volpe, he's taken incredible strides at shortstop. They really have to trust in him to be a guy who could hit 15 or more home runs, hit for a high average, and still play good defense. Jazz Chisholm Jr., a full season in New York, back at second base, another position for him. That's his third position now in the last year and a half, really. But that's more of his natural position, so he should excel out there at second with the short porch of Yankee Stadium. Paul Goldschmidt is an interesting case. See, if this Yankee team was in 2017, this would be the best team in baseball, hands down, right? With Stanton, Bellinger, Judge, Goldschmidt. That's just isn't the case. Goldschmidt is out of his prime. He is a guy, he could maybe hit 250 this year. Maybe he'll hit 20 home runs. He's going to have a veteran presence, but he's not the guy who you should have gotten this offseason. Christian Walker would have been a great addition for the Yankees. Alex Bregman would have been a great addition for the Yankees. But both of them go to their AL rivals. They strike out really on everybody. And their team, when it comes to hitting, got worse. The part I will talk about is the Yankees pitching is one of the best in Major League Baseball, no matter how you look at it. Their bullpen, I think, is probably the best right now in Major League Baseball. You look at, they trade for Devin Williams from Milwaukee, one of the best relievers in baseball, but he's never come up big in the postseason. He's, struggled for the most part in the postseason. Luke Weaver really was a surprise last year, and now I would say he's one of the top 15 relievers in baseball, maybe even top 10, with how good of a postseason he had. He's going to be out of the back end of the bullpen, really locking it down for them. The Yankees have the pieces to have a very good bullpen, and their rotation is right there as well, right? You have Garrett Cole, former Cy Young Award winner, Carlos Rodon, who had a very good bounce back 2024 after a rough 2023. You have Luis Gil, the 2024 AL Rookie of the Year, Clark Schmidt, who's a very, very good pitcher. And you also add Max Fried, one of the best pitchers in the game, a former All-Star, and was one of the aces on the Atlanta Braves as they won the NL East for the past 5-6 straight years. So you add the right guy out of the rotation. He's a lefty. He's going to eat innings. But I have that drama now with Marcus Stroman saying he's a starter. He's not going to get in the bullpen. You can't really move his contract. So you ask the question, what do you do with Marcus Stroman? Do you do a 6-man rotation? Which is definitely a possibility. But do you really want to take that on to start the year? Do you really want your guys getting 5 to 6 days off at the beginning of the year, not really being able to get into that every day, groove? during the early part of the year, when when you get to August or September, realistically, you're going to be running a 5-man, and then in October, it will be a 4-man rotation. I don't think that's what the Yankees want to do. So now they have to figure out what they're going to do with that. And after that, they don't really have starting pitching depth. Obviously, they signed Carlos Carrasco, but he is not, a guy you can really rely on at this point in his career when you get to September and October, where the Yankees are going to get in 2025 and be a starting pitcher, let's say if two of their guys go down. So that's why I give the Red Sox an advantage over the Yankees, is because they have that depth. We'll talk about them in a second. I would say the Yankees are 87 to about a 93 win team this year. They're a very good team. I think they're one of the best teams in the American League. I would say they have a very good shot to go back to the World Series. They have a very good shot to go to the American League Championship Series. But I do think the reason why I can't have the first in the division, they lack parts that Boston has. If you told me a week ago that I'd be picking Boston as the AL Division champion, AL East champions, I would say there's no way. They go out and sign Bregman. I don't think anybody really saw that coming at this point. They go out and they get Bregman. That makes this team so much better. This team goes from a fringe playoff team to, I would say, they're going to the playoffs. I would be shocked if they don't. They're starting pitching. They have one of the better depth rotations in baseball because they have about 6, 7, 8 guys who could be starting pitchers. Right? They have Brian Bello, Tanner Houck, Cutter Crawford. They added Walker Buehler. They added Patrick Sandoval. He's going to miss most of the year, but he has a chance to return. They have Cooper Griswold back in the minor leagues. And then the biggest piece they added in the rotation, they went out and they got Garrett Crochet from the Chicago White Sox, who had his first year as a starter last year and was one of the best pitchers in the American League from the starting pitching area. And he wants an extension, but he's a player who's going to end up probably getting that extension if he plays well this year, and I'm sure he will, out of that Red Sox rotation. The bullpen is the only really concerning part for me. They have Liam Hendriks, who will hopefully have a bounce-back season. Aroldis Chapman, they added him in free agency, who will have a very good season. Justice Slayton is a guy who fell way under the radar last year, had a sub-3 ERA. He will most likely continue have a pivotal role in their bullpen, but after that, it's not as strong as a bullpen as the Yankees. Where I give Boston the advantage is their hitting. And right now, it's hard to say that their hitting isn't better than the New York Yankees. You look at the catcher position, Connor Wong is a very good catcher. Him and Wells are kind of even in my book. Tristan Casas, at this point in his career, if he can stay healthy, he's better than Paul Goldschmidt at this point in their careers. Alex Bregman, this is the really interesting part. Where does Bregman play? He's the third baseman, but the Red Sox already have a third baseman. His name is Rafael Devers. He's one of the best third basemen in all of baseball. Where does Devers go? Where does Bregman go? Devers feels like he's entitled to have third base. He signed that extension with Boston to stay in Boston to basically be their third baseman. He doesn't want to move to DH yet in his career. Cora feels like it would be best. Alex Cora, the Red Sox manager, feels like it would be best for Bregman to be the third baseman. This is a really interesting argument that is going to pan out over Red Sox camp. Will Devers move off of third base? Will that be the right move for them to move Devers off of third base? I don't know what the answer is to that question right now. Bregman won a Gold Glove over at third base last year for the Astros. I don't know if that means he's the everyday third baseman for the Boston Red Sox. Right now, the projection is that he's going to be the everyday second baseman for the Red Sox, but that kind of blocks Christian Campbell, one of the Red Sox top prospects who is expected to be on the major league roster this year, which if Bregman goes to third, then Campbell is most likely going to be playing second almost every day for Boston, which means Devers goes to DH, and then you look at Masataka Yoshida, who will most likely be on the move. The Red Sox have had talks about Dylan Cease, which would be a blockbuster trade and would just even add more to their rotation. But what would they have to give up? They have the pieces to make the move. Yoshida, they have the piece out there in right field, or Wilyer Abreu, even though they said they're not going to include him in a trade for Cease. I would be surprised if his name isn't at least floated around in trades for Dylan Cease. They have the pieces out of the outfield because you got Roman Anthony coming up, who will most likely be on the Major League roster. I would say by the end of April, early May, he will be on the Major League roster contributing to the Boston Red Sox almost every day. You have Cedar Rafaela, who's gotten better. The Red Sox went undefeated in every game that Rafaela hit a home run in 2024. He's a guy who can play all around the field, but right now he's most likely going to be their starting center fielder. And you have Jarren Duran, who in my opinion is the best player on the Boston Red Sox. He was last year's All-Star Game MVP, really came on to the scene, led the MLB in doubles last year, had a very good season out of the outfield. He could play left field and he could play center field. So you have those pieces out of the outfield who are very good. Wilyer Abreu kind of doesn't have a spot right now, so realistically, I think he would be on the move instead of sitting on Boston's bench. While he has a lot of value, he was top 5 in AL Rookie of the Year voting last year. I'm pretty sure he might have won a Gold Glove last year out of right field in the American League. So he has had very good statistics and a really good, a strong rookie year to have the value to get moved at this point for a high leverage player like a Dylan Cease, like for example Robert Suarez out of San Diego. They're talking about trading him as well. So the Red Sox have the pieces to make moves. You look at the infield, Trevor Story has to stay healthy this year for the Red Sox to really take that step forward. They haven't been back to the playoffs since 2021 when they were 2 wins away from going to the World Series. They haven't been back to the playoffs since. They've let Mookie Betts, they traded him away. They let Xander Bogaerts walk. They let JD Martinez walk. They've let a lot of players leave. They finally got the big piece. They went out, got Bregman, 3 years, $40 million a year. They have a team. They have a team good enough to make the playoffs. They have a team good enough to make the ALCS. They have a team good enough to go to the World Series. I think they're a 90 to 95 win team this year. That's how good I think the Boston Red Sox are. They're a team that I could see who weren't in the playoffs last year, who could easily make the playoffs this year. They're supposed to make the playoffs this year. With the moves they made, they say that this is a win now period. We're not going to wait for the young guys to come up. They could come up as well, but we're going to try to win a World Series this year. And that's what the Boston Red Sox really did this offseason. They believe in the roster they have, so they went out and said, let's go get the pieces and let's go win a World Series. So I think the Boston Red Sox will win the AL East in 2025. So I would say my final standings for the AL East: at 5, the Blue Jays; at 4, the Rays; 3, Orioles; 2, Yankees; and 1, Red Sox. I really only see the Red Sox and Yankees making the playoffs from this division, but it's a very intriguing division with a lot of storylines and things to look at throughout spring training into the 2025 season, especially as we near the deadline in 2025. But I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you never miss when I upload another podcast. I will be back with another Rounding Third episode on Thursday. I will preview the National League East. For now, make sure to turn on post notifications, subscribe, get ready for Sunday stream with the Baltimore Orioles and the Philadelphia Phillies spring training action. That's at 1:05 Eastern right here on Big Fan Sports. Thank you for watching episode number 1 of the Rounding Third podcast. I'm Jaden Harper, and I'll see you next time.